Is your daughter there with you?
No, no, no. There, Bernie, my wife's here, but she's floating about there somewhere. That's it.
Gotcha. Okay, well, we are live. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrick Millikin from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I should say good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. Our guest today, Richard O'Ra, my new friend, it's about 8 o'clock there in Belfast, isn't it?
Yeah, 8 o'clock. It's actually a nice evening, Patrick. It's lovely here.
Is
Very
it?
nice.
Yeah. Well, Ricky's brand new book, Goering's Gold, has just come out. And about a year ago, or maybe a little bit more than a year, we met like this virtually to discuss Rick's previous novel, Northern Heist, which just an amazing piece of work. And we had such a great talk about that. I'm just delighted to have you back to talk about this new book.
Well, it's brilliant to be back, to be honest with you. I enjoyed our last conversation so much. The crack was 90. I mean, we covered so much ground, and it was like the only thing that was missing was a couple of pints between two buddies in the pub.
That's right. That's right.
Oh,
There's so much to discuss in this new book. I absolutely loved it, and not sure how you managed to pull this off. There's so much in this new book, but let's just go for the people who haven't read The Northern Heist. Maybe you can just give a brief kind of synopsis of that book and how you came to write it, and then we can pick up where that leaves off.
Yeah, well, we'll go to how I came to write it first. There was a robbery in Belfast on the 21st of December 2004, and it was the biggest robbery in British history. And what actually happened was the robbers virtually emptied the bank. They virtually emptied the Northern Bank in Belfast, took every penny out of it, and they ended up getting away with £26.5 million. And there was chaos over this because the peace process was in its infancy and it was building up, and people were trying to build trust with the parties who had been warring. So everyone believed that the IRA done it. The two governments, British, Irish government, all the parties, all the local political parties, anyone who had an opinion believed the IRA done it, and so did I, because I didn't think anyone else was capable of pulling a stunt like this. The only, as far as I was concerned, the only people who could have pulled this were the IRA, because they were probably the most professional bank robbers in the business, for want of a better word. So myself and my daughter, a couple of days later, I mean, this didn't happen overnight. This is 2004. We were sitting in a pub in Belfast. My daughter doesn't particularly drink, but I was having a pint of Guinness, and I came up in conversation as I would, and she said to me, I said to her, "What if the IRA didn't do it?" She says, "Who else could have done it?" I says, "Who knows? Could have been some really clever individual who plans things down to the tiniest detail, who knows what's going to happen in any given situation, who looks at scenarios and is able to pull things together." And within the hour of us starting this conversation, we had the idea of me writing a book about this bank robbery, and we had the name of the protagonist, a guy called Ructions O'Hare, right? And that's basically where it started. But that was the basic. It's always, all books, no matter what they are, start with one idea. I mean, all the ideas just don't flood into your head in a split second. They start with one idea, and the one idea was that a master criminal pulls off this move. And so that's where it started. But we had to hang it up because I was doing other work. I was doing work for a project on with Northern Ireland Screen. And I also, I had another hunger strike book to write, Afterlives, which I wrote. And then...
Is that the Blanket Men?
It's a sequel to The Blanket Men. It's called Afterlives. So I wrote that, and that was released in 2011. That was important. 2010, sorry. And then I was going to literally go after Northern Heist then. I footed about for a while. I still had stuff with Northern Ireland Screen, so it wasn't that I wasn't busy. It just, I wasn't focused totally on writing Northern Heist yet. And then my friend Jerry Conlon died, and he had his book there in the name of the sun. So I committed to Jerry to writing his story after he got out of prison. So I wrote that.
Which, by the way, I should say, is an amazing book. And I've got Rick was kind enough to send me a copy of it. And American publishers, take note. This is prime. I'd love to see you get an American publisher, U.S. publisher for this book. It's really terrific.
Well, and look who's on. Look who wrote the foreword. Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp. Yeah.
Johnny wrote the foreword, which was fantastic. And I mean, I don't know nothing about his personal life or none of this stuff with the girl, right? His former wife. But he's a tremendous writer. I found him to be a gentleman, but so I had to do Jerry's book. And Jerry's book entailed an awful lot of research. I had to travel throughout the UK. I was down in Dorset one day, London the next, Glasgow the next, Derry, Tipperary, Dublin dozens of times. So it's all around the place pulling this story together. And I got it out in 2014. And that was it done. So as far as I was concerned, I had done my duty through Jerry. And then I sat down and I says, right now, let's seriously look at this Goering's Gold, Northern Heist. And I sat down and I started putting the bones of it together. You never really have the whole story. The story develops as you get into it. There are characters who push their way to the fore in your story and demand more attention than you maybe wanted to give them and stuff like that. But eventually we got Goering's Gold out in 2018, and it went bananas, right? It sold very well. And then there was a great story here, Patrick. I mean,
wait a minute. You said Goering's Gold came out.
Sorry, Northern Heist. Northern Heist.
Okay.
I keep mixing the two of them up. I beg your pardon. So there's a great story here. The guy who owns Melville Publications, right? Dennis Johnson. How we ended up talking today. Someone just said to him, look, there's a book, read it. That's a good book. And he read the book and he absolutely loved it. So the next thing he's in contact with my publisher in Ireland, and it's Northern Heist, is published in the US. And it did very, very well. And then I wrote Goering's Gold, and lo and behold, Dennis wanted Goering. He wanted to be the publisher for Goering's Gold. So Goering's Gold was my first all-American book, published in New York, and I'm so happy with that. I think it's fantastic.
It's a wonderful book. Before we get into it, I just wanted to say the original heist in the Northern Heist, the book, it was done with such style.
No.
The way they managed to get all of the money out was just such a blatant,
Well, as I said to you before, in terms of robbing banks, it was a work of art. I mean, that's the sentence that I use to describe it, and I use that very deliberately because it was. These guys just didn't run in and take all the money out. They didn't go near the bank. They went through what was called a tagger kidnapping. And tagger kidnapping is where you hold bank employees' families hostage, and you then send the bank employees in to the bank the next day as if nothing's happened, and then they're then told to bring the money out to you. And that's exactly what the bank robbers did in this case. And the beauty of it was, I said this before, the beauty of this bank robbery was this. What they did, they weren't sure whether or not they were caught, they were being watched, or it was a setup, or the cops were just waiting on them, making the wrong move, and then they were going to come in and arrest a lot of them. So what they said was to one of the guys whose family was being held by the robbers, Where's a big hold on, a big Manchester United football hold on? Fill that with money and £50 notes. So he filled it with £1 million, walked out of the bank. The security was at lapse. Nobody was old men sitting there, maybe pensionable, and they weren't too tuned into the possibility that there's a team here will take every shilling out of the bank. So
A lot of trash, right?
That's it. So he walks out of the bank, goes up to the end of the street, goes to a bus stop, sits at the bus stop, puts down the Manchester United bag. The guy comes up, sits beside him, takes a Manchester United bag, and walks away with £1 million, right? And in that instance, the bank robbers knew exactly that there's no cops involved here, because they wouldn't let you away with £1 million. There's no cops anywhere about this. This bank is as open as a shop. You can just literally walk in and take what you want, and that's what they did. On the way back, the guy made a phone call. Next thing, huge lorry, right, pulled up at the side of the bank, and the two bank employees were told to fill huge trolleys full of money and to disguise it with rubbish. That's exactly what they done. They pushed the rubbish into the lifts. The lifts took it from the vaults straight up to the loading bay, took it out onto the street, and the guys in the lorry dropped the tailgate. They pushed the stuff onto the tailgate, and next thing it was in the lorry and away. And in that instance, they got away with £16 million, which would be roughly about $23–24 million. They weren't happy. I mean, they weren't happy with that sort of money, Patrick, because there was more money in the bank, and they just couldn't resist it. So they came back again.
That's the best.
And done exactly the same thing.
It's so great.
And they just looked, and then the irony of the whole thing was that they phoned the cops up and told the cops that the bank had just been robbed. I mean, tremendous. Not saying I envy them, but if you were into bank robbing, it's one of those ones you'd love to be involved in.
Yeah, no, it's almost like as you say, a ballet
Well,
dance.
that's what it was. It was fine tuned. A fantastic bit of fine tuning. If you're a bank robber.
Yeah, and so Ructions, your man, he very wisely separates the marked currency from the unmarked currency. And,
yeah. And he gives the marked currency to the IRA, which is useless bits of paper. They're not worth it. You couldn't buy a sweet in the shop. You couldn't buy a loaf of bread with them because they're all marked. And he goes away with the unmarked currency, about £12 million. And
he's in the wind.
He's gone.
He's in the wind, yeah. And
but,
so
but,
go ahead.
But the IRA expect a cut.
Yeah.
In those days, they got a cut of everything. And here's
this. They're taking the fall for it, so they might as well get paid.
That's the way they looked at it. That's the way they looked at it. We're taking the hit, but may as well get the dough. And so they fall out badly with Ructions. They try to sink him, and he's just too good for them. I mean, the guy's so sharp and tuned in and thinking ahead. He's always thinking, not what am I going to do in the next 20 minutes or the next hour or next tomorrow or next week. He's thinking in terms of what am I going to do in 5 weeks' time or 5 years' time? Where am I going to be? And he's just too good.
So, okay, so I think it's maybe 3 years later or several years later when Goering's gold picks up. Is that about right?
That's right, yeah. But
and
2.5, 3 years.
Yeah, and so he and Eleanor, who we'll talk about, they go on a year-long cruise right after the. And what better way to disappear for a year?
As you would.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have 12 million pounds, it didn't help because it cost them a fortune to get it laundered. But even at that, you've made millions and millions of pounds. Why wouldn't you take a year-long cruise and chill out and look at the world and have a nice time? So him and Eleanor do that, and then they're hit with the recession in 2008 when all the banks and all collapsed, and he loses a fortune because he never listened to his friend Serge Mercier, who was the guy who was laundering the money for him, and he put his money into the stock markets, and the stock markets collapsed. So he didn't end up absolutely broke, but he wasn't far away from it, you know. So and then so that's sort of way a rationale for him getting involved in the Hermann Goering treasure hunt.
Right. And can you briefly, for the people listening, I really don't want to give spoilers away here, but you outline it fairly early in the book. Let's talk about the historical, what happened at the end of the war as Goering knows that defeat is imminent. And so he takes stashes bits of gold bullion in neutral cities, right?
Well, Goering by 1944, mid-1944, the Russians had already overrun Poland. There's only the River Oder stopping them from going into Germany proper. And the Allies, after the 6th of June 1944, we had D-Day. So right. they were literally coming through France and coming onto the German borders as well. So Goering realizes that the game's up. There's no chance of us winning this war. And he's looking about him and he says, what's going to happen after it? He says, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to need money. I'm going to need collateral. I'm going to need leverage. So he says, and he's access to all the riches of the Reich. So he says, you know what? I'll take a few tons of gold, 4 or 5 tons of gold, and I'll stash it somewhere. Where can I stash it? Well, I can't stash it in any country that's fighting Germany because we can't get into them, right? So we'll have to stash it somewhere neutral, in some neutral country. And he looks around the map, and there's little Ireland, right? Southern Ireland, which isn't involved in the war, which is virtually, there's even very few policemen in Ireland at the time. It was just after the Civil War and after the War of Independence, and Ireland was a very poor country, hadn't been economically developed. And he says, Ireland would be a great place, right? But where would we put it? So he comes up with this rather, if I say so myself, ingenious idea.
Which we can't really get into.
We can't reveal.
There's a lot of good Indiana Jones kind of stuff there.
Yeah. He comes up with this idea, and he says that'll do. And he's in his bunker. He's in his house, Carron Hall. Carron Hall was a very palatial place where Goering lived outside Berlin. And he calls in one of his a German guy who was a former keeper of the National Museum in Ireland, and there was a guy that was, and he says, I have a special mission for you. I want you to go to Ireland, and I want you to do a certain, task for me. And the guy says, okay. So Goering ends up, again, I don't want to go into detail, but Goering's operation takes place, and Goering ends up, as you know, at the Nuremberg trials for the Nazi war leaders, and he's in a bad place. He knows he's going to get executed, but he's going to be hanged. He doesn't want to be hanged because being hanged makes him look like a criminal. This guy had no fear of death. He was actually a hedonist. Out of all the Nazis, this guy was probably the most attractive in terms of writing about him because he was such a character. He loved garish uniforms. He loved Cuban cigars, lovely red wines. He loved morphine. He was a morphine addict. It's like something you'd see in the streets of Belfast or the streets of New York, only with a few pounds.
He seems straight out of like Weimar era decadence.
Well, that's absolutely what he was out of. Although he didn't like the Weimar Republic, but that's besides the point. And then all of a sudden he does. So he sets all this up, and it goes ahead, and the dozer, and then he's facing death. He's found guilty at Nuremberg, and the court sentenced him to be hanged. And he doesn't want to be hanged because he sees it as a disgrace. He would much prefer to commit suicide or be shot. If he had been shot, he assumed it would have been a soldier's death by a firing squad. But he didn't want to be hanged, so he did a deal with someone, right? That someone is alleged that it was one of the American guards. And this is in the book. So the deal that he does is that he'll give the American guard his ceremonial baton.
Yes.
These field marshals, and Goering was the highest ranking officer in World War II because he was Reichsmarschall. He was a 6-star general.
He was really second in command, right?
Second in command after Hitler. Yeah, he was a 6-star general. So he gives this guy his special baton, and the guy slips him, Mickey Finn slips him the old morphine, or the old poison tablet, and he takes the tablet and he dies. And that's basically the premise of the book, right? The baton ends up with Serge Mercier, who is Ruxians' money launderer. But this guy's a bit of he's a what we call a fence. He'll buy if you've got stolen art, he'll find you a buyer for it. But he also does a bit of collecting, and he ends up with this baton. And there's a whole rigmarole. There's not rigmarole. It's a whole part of the story where an outfit called the Fourth Reich, right? They want the baton back, and they know Serge Mercier has it. So they raid his house, looking at it, and he has a safe room down in the basement. And him and his girlfriend are in the safe room, and they shoot his valet, his servant, dead. But they don't get the baton, and eventually they realize that Ruxians realizes, and so does Serge, that this baton has value more than just its in terms of its historical value, right? There's something more to this here, and they then find out that this baton is the key to tons of Nazi gold hidden by the Reichsfuhrer. They don't know where it's hidden. So you have this sort of trail all over Europe, and in Marseille and in Paris and various other parts of Europe. And Ruxians is trying to stay one step ahead of the posse. And the posse is quite extensive. It's the Fourth Reich, it's the IRA, it's Interpol, it's the Irish police, it's the British police. There's half the country's looking for Ruxians. Ruxians isn't on the run, but they find out that he's Mercier's best friend, and that he's the fixer. If anything's going to happen here, if anybody's going to find this gold, it's going to be this fella. So they're all chasing him. They're all following. They all want to know where he is, and that's basically the story. It's a treasure hunt on Treasure Island. The Treasure Island is Ireland.
And at the opening of the book, all these things are kind of converging, and the wonderfully named Tiny Murdoch has finally tracked down where Ruxians is in the Bordeaux region, right?
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about their history together.
Well, I call him Tiny Murdoch because he's 6'6", right? And he's a very prominent IRA man, someone who is actually Ruxians had been in the IRA for a while during the late 1980s, touching the early 1990s, and Tiny had been his boss, and Ruxians had been Tiny's protege. Tiny had seen in Ruxians that spark of genius, and Tiny had it as well. Tiny was one of those guys who could organize really, really intricate operations. And he's seen this in Ruxians as well. So in many ways, Ruxians was Tiny's protege. But Ruxians fell out with the IRA after the 1994 ceasefire.
Right.
He didn't, I mean, as far as he was concerned, it was over. And Tiny resented the fact that he had walked away after Tiny had put so much time and effort into him. And Ruxins went back to his uncle, Panzer. Panzer O'Hare. Panzer O'Hare owned a large sort of ranch farm out on the outskirts of Belfast, and Ruxins went to work for him. And Panzer was an out-and-out gangster. Now, gangster in the nicest sense of the word. He had all sorts of schemes. I mean, for example, he had a greyhound track, and he used to fix the races for people for money. He had all sorts of. He was also a money lender, and Ruxins was a savvy. Ruxins was the guy who came around to your door and demanded the money. If you didn't pay up, Ruxins would have sorted you out. Ruxins would have hit you over the head with a baton or something. But so Panzer was into all that, and Ruxins ended up as right man. But Ruxins was also, Panzer also did armed robberies, good armed robberies, and not Mickey Mouse stuff. I mean, it had to be £1 million in it for Panzer to get involved. But Panzer always craved the big one, and the big one was the National Bank one, the one that Ruxins ended up doing. And that's all he ever wanted. He was dying of cancer, and he says, all I ever wanted was the big one, that one that always eludes the best of us. And Ruxin said to him, well, funny enough, I have it lined up. And so, and Tiny is aware of, Tiny ends up being aware that it's happening, and he lets it go ahead because the IRA was at a ceasefire. They couldn't be seen to be carrying out these huge robberies. They were also in government over here, Sinn Féin that is. So they couldn't be seen to be holding up banks and emptying the vaults.
Jerry Adams had risen to prominence by this time, right?
Gary Adams was the head of Sinn Féin. He was also an MLA up in our local government, Stormont, and so all of that there was happening, and Sinn Féin was trying to portray themselves, and they were, partially successful until this bank robbery. But they were trying to portray themselves as a bona fide political party like everyone else. The bottom line of that was, of course, was that behind Sinn Féin was the IRA. And the IRA at that stage was armed to the teeth with Libyan guns. So if it were proven that the IRA carried out this bank robbery, and it's never been, that's one of the beauties of it, it's never been proven that the IRA did it. So it suited Teddy and the IRA to let Russians do it, because if they're caught, they can turn around and say this guy is an ordinary criminal. It's got nothing to do with us. But at the end of it, they want their dough. Teddy wants his dough. He wants at least half of it.
And they want a confession, because that's the only way they're gonna prove that he did it, right?
Well, they don't want a confession from him, no, but they want money. They want their cut. They want their 50% of it, and he gives them 50% of it. It's 50% of more money. It's not worth $2. It's not worth $10. So that's how he ends up in trouble with Tiny, right? Well, he ends up in bad trouble with Tiny. He gets Tiny kneecapped. And Tiny resents that as well. And Ruxins is just he works everyone. He works everyone money, but he gets away with the money in the end on the girl. And fills his saddlebags full of money and rides straight out of Dodge.
Now, not to spend too much time on this, but is there a bit of, there is a bit of you in Ruxins in the sense that some of his own personal history sort of jives with yours, right? Wasn't he, I think I read in the May 5th, is that the right date? May 5th of 81, when Bobby Sands was allowed to die. That is the kind of the decisive moment that inspires Ruxins to join the IRA, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was a very pivotal time in Irish history. A very pivotal time in Irish history um, because there was so much happening in terms of the politics and what where people were and what they were doing, and the IRA couldn't handle the amount of recruits that were trying to get into the movement. Rushings was lucky; he did get in, and I mean the hunger strike was a massive incentive to Irish people to join the struggle.
Right. And yeah, I know you've written extensively about it, of course, so we won't go too far into that. And we talked a lot about that last time. We could go on for hours about this, but let's talk a little bit about, because I don't want us to run out of time. Let's talk about the Irish stance during World War II towards the Reich. It was you know, the what would it go? The enemy of my, or the friend of my enemy. How does that expression go?
It's my enemy's my enemy's friend is my enemy, something like that. I'm not too
Something
sure.
like that. Yeah.
The point is that the IRA, the Irish in particular, Ireland, the Irish didn't particularly like the English. And historically, the English have been very cruel and very repressive and very oppressive towards Ireland and towards the Irish people. But not only that, they had no great sympathy for the Nazis. They had no sympathy for the Nazis at all. I mean, for the IRA, the only thing that was interesting about the Nazis is that they had rifles, and they could send the IRA guns with which to fight for Irish freedom. But that was as much as their interest in the Nazi.
Right, the ideology. They
had no interest in National Socialism, or probably didn't even have understood it, and they probably see what's wrong with the Jews. I mean, Ireland had very few Jewish people, and they would have. My father was knocking about in the 40s in the IRA, and his attitude was he could never, as a young man, see what's the big deal with the Jews. Why are they killing the Jews? Couldn't understand it. You know what? From our point of view, Irish point of view, they never experienced the sort of hatred that the Nazis had for the Jews. They couldn't get it.
Right. And what was I going to say? So getting back to this particular book, there's so much. Let's talk about the rise of the contemporary rise of this far right movement everywhere. You know, it is kind of disturbing to see it all over the place, and especially with this sort of ragtag group that's calling themselves the Fourth Reich. Yeah, and you have this kind of a Marlene Dietrich-esque character. Brigitte Meyer, is that her name?
Gita Meyer.
Yeah, and she's a professor, and I thought, by the way, that was a very clever way by having her lecturing to get very important information about Goering to the reader.
Well,
brilliant.
You got it in one. That's exactly the rationale behind it.
Yeah.
I needed the reader to understand who this guy Hermann Goering was. I mean, he's dead, 80 years.
Yeah.
So a new generation would hardly be acutely aware of who he was or what he was or what he did. So, and that was the mechanism that he used. And the question and answer during that sort of chapter between the students and Gita was how I did it. But this Fourth Reich, there is a Fourth Reich in Germany. There's an organization called the Fourth Reich, and Germany is bubbling over with right-wing extremist groups who are hell-bent on creating a Nazi state. And it's not just in Germany, it's in France as well. And to a lesser extent, it's happening in England. There's a very extreme right-wing racist sort of element in England.
Here too, I'm sad to say.
and it's something that Democrats and people who value democracy need to keep an eye on.
I'll say.
Because it's very, very dangerous.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the internet, while it's been miraculous in a lot of ways, it's allowed a lot of these, formerly fringe groups to communicate with each other. Yeah.
Communicate and to blossom and
Yeah.
to put forward programs that would seem to be rational and would seem to be positive, but they're really not. And a lot of them are very, very dangerous people. And the situation reminds me of 1921 when the National Socialist Party was just formed and various elements was joining it. And in Germany was very fragmented. And the soldiers coming back didn't know where they were, and the left and the right, and you had all sorts of micro groups. And that's we're not too far away from that now.
Yeah.
In my view.
Now, so I'm interested I want to talk about Mercier, Serge, a little bit, the fence. I found him to be a very interesting character. And, and so the French police are investigating him. And so they kind of indirectly get to Ructions through their investigation of Mercier. Is that right? I think that's
yes,
right.
that's right. Mercier is a great pronunciation. Yeah. Well, he's been knocking around forever. He's unknown to the police, right? Until Goering's gold, he's unknown to them. He's been very, very good at staying under the radar. He stays under the radar because he doesn't actually do anything overtly illegal. He doesn't do robberies. He doesn't do anything that would bring him to the attention of the police. All he does is take your money and he'd launder it, right? Or he would buy your art. He wouldn't buy your art. He would take your art and he'd say, you have a Rembrandt? Well, I have a guy who's looking a Rembrandt, right? You're going to have to pay. He's going to leave it with me. He comes back with, and so that's what Mercier does. He has contacts, and he sells stuff off, and in that way he stays below the radar. And the people to whom he's selling the stuff, selling, for example, the art, using it as an example, they don't want anyone to know that they have a Rembrandt, certainly a stolen Rembrandt,
Sure.
Right? So they're not going to say to the cops, Serge Mercier sold me this. So he's been very good, and that's all. But that all collapses when the Fourth Reich raid Mercier's home, looking Goering's ceremonial baton, and then they kill one of his servants, and so he's then in the police eye, and they realize this guy lives on the shores of Lake Geneva. He has a yacht, right? He has a huge mansion here, and he has no means of income. Where does the money come for all this, right? And they then realize that Serge, there's a lot more to this boy than catches the eye, and then that's how they realize that Ructions is involved. They start going through his phone records, and there's this number coming up all the time, and they trace the number back to Ructions, and then they follow Serge and Ructions meet in Paris, actually in the Louvre, right?
Yeah.
And the cops is watching them through the CCTV.
Some of those details too, Ricky, I was going to ask you, the way they communicate, because they're very savvy about people lip reading.
Yeah.
And the way he slips an envelope in. Is some of that, did that require some research, or is some of that standard IRA procedure?
That's the big IRA procedure.
Yeah.
if me and you were walking up the street and we were talking about something, we would talk like that with our hands over our mouths, and we wouldn't actually speak about stuff directly. We would talk in a code. We would say, I've seen some mafia guys doing this. Harry's been doing it for tens of years. And you would say, did you see Big Alec? Big Alec making Big Alec's real name, but you would know who Big Alec is, right? They talk in code because they're conscious all the time that 9 times out of 10, the cops or British intelligence are watching them and are recording them. So they not only cover their mouths, but they talk in code as well. This is IRA people. Well, they used to. The IRA's not really about anymore. But that's what they used to do, and that's all just craft. That's tradecraft if you're in the IRA.
Right.
I ever was.
Yeah. It's interesting. I read a book. I'm not sure why I'm bringing this up, but I think it's going to pertain. There's a wonderful book. You know Simenon, who wrote the Inspector Maigret books?
I'm not sure. No.
Georges Simenon, the French novelist who wrote the Inspector Maigret series. Anyway, he wrote a number of standalone novels, and there was one of them that's set during the war, occupied Paris. And it's this really slippery, interesting tale. And you know, the people are turning against each other. There are all these shifting alliances. You're never sure who to trust. And it just reminded me a little bit about, you know, the whole tradition in Ireland, not the tradition, but the role of the informer in Irish culture, you know. And I was thinking, well, that has to do with the similar situation, you know, an occupying force, you know, namely the British, and these shifting alliances in Ireland.
Well, Ireland, the IRA ended up absolutely penetrated with informers and we call them touts, and with informers and touts, and at the you know, at the end, and there was one guy in particular. The IRA set up in 1978 a special unit to catch informers, and if they caught them, they shot them dead. That's typical. Michael Collins done exactly the same thing back in 1919, 1921. And there's a whole story which I'm looking at the minute very, very strongly. Let's put it like that, about informers, and the role they played, and they were crucial. They ended up in leadership positions, and they were able to tell the Brits what way leadership is thinking, what way those people who were in the ASUs, and the ASUs an active service unit, they're the cutting edge of the IRA. They're the guys that go out on the ambushes, right? That go out to confront the British Army or whoever. What way they were thinking, and their thinking was very important in terms of where's this struggle going to be in 5 years' time, and informers were crucial to that. And I'm actually looking, as I say, very, very heavily at that. And I mean, I don't really want to say much more than that, but it's on my agenda.
Yeah, there's that Liam O'Flaherty novel, The Informer, and the film version of it, of course.
Jeff O'Nolan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was fantastic. Victor McLaughlin.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Shoot, I'm running out of time. There's so much I want to talk about. All right, so let's get back to the book here. You've managed to kind of, it's this, you know, globe trotting. It reminded me of like a bit of Le Carré mixed with a little bit of Jason Bourne. And it's such a fun page turner of a book to read. We're going through all this fascinating history behind it, but folks reading it, you're in for an absolute thrill ride. But I wanted to talk to you about just about the research. I mean, this must have required quite a bit of research.
Huge research. I mean, I had to. Well, first of all, what I wanted it to be, and you touched on it there, Patrick, I wanted it to be a fun read.
Yeah.
I wanted to get people to lift this book and enjoy the thing, right? Enjoy the read. Come on board with Ructions, right? And enjoy the crack and enjoy his journey, right?
He has a bit of the gentleman burglar in him, by the way.
He has, and a touch of Jason Bourne as well.
Yeah.
Well, I thought the Jason Bourne thing was quite apt, but there was a huge research in it. I mean, I had to go. Well, one of the things I had to do. I'll give you a bit of a story. To find out the location where the gold would have been hidden, I wanted it hidden in Ireland. My initial thoughts were, we'll hide it on an island on the Shannon River. Shannon River is the biggest river in Ireland. It runs the whole length of Ireland virtually, and there's wee islands dotted all over it. And I was okay, and I went down and I looked at some islands. Actually, we got on the boat and paid for the guy to take us out and look at these islands and where would you put it and all this. And it actually settled on one. And the island that settled on was an island that had been inhabited by monks from the 6th century up until Henry VIII destroyed the monasteries.
Really?
Yeah, and it settled on the remains of that. And then I was sitting with a friend, a journalist friend, and we were just throwing it about. I mean, I said to him about this, and he said, no. He says, I have the perfect location. And I can't say because it would destroy the book, right, for readers. He says, I have the perfect location. And so he and I got into a car and we drove down to the other side of Ireland, and we came upon this very quaint graveyard.
Is that your daughter?
No, that's my wife. That's Bernie. It's floating about there. Patrick, it's just Patrick. Come on, say hello.
Yeah, let's say hey.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Great. We're having a fun time once again.
Oh, yeah. Ricky's very entertaining.
Yeah.
Good storyteller.
Absolutely.
Nobody better.
Well, there's
I think she's biased, Ricky.
well, slightly.
No, but apart from that, can't take it away from him. I'd like to be biased, but you have to put your hands up. You have to say the truth with a stern in the face. He's a great writer, and he's a great.
We'd love to get you both out here to the desert one of these days. You should come out here.
Well, but I can't get in.
He can't get in.
Oh.
I was put out of America. Although having said that,
We'll have to smuggle you in. That would be a good
well,
story.
Can I say to you, I love the place. We loved it. We went 4 years in a row. We went down to Disney with the kids, and we went to Disney in Boston and New York and up to New Jersey and stuff. And I mean, you. I'm not saying this because you're sitting in front of you. You guys don't know how good you have it. It's brilliant. We absolutely loved it. Unfortunately, they decided that I was persona non grata, and the 5th time we went, they sent me out. They deported me to London.
They put us on the next plane going. It didn't matter where the plane was going to. If it was London, Germany, France, the next plane that was going out, the whole family out.
But I mean, I loved it. We loved it. We loved the whole experience. Yeah. For us, it was the experience of a lifetime.
Yeah.
How long have you two been together?
46 years.
46 years.
Wow. The 10 best years of your life, right?
I know how she's stuck with for all that.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's beautiful.
The husband after the first 10 off nearly, that's how. So you don't count the first, that brings you to 30 odds. So, but you count the first number of years off.
Yeah.
But,
because I was in jail. I was in non-case.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're still here.
Well, so is there any chance of them changing that, or?
Well, there is. Hopefully, there is. I mean, hopefully there is, and I have an application into an immigration application at the minute. Oh, the COVID thing has been very, very
Yeah.
They weren't taking any applications, but I won at the minute, and fingers crossed. You never know your luck.
Yeah.
We made a friendly president might say that will give the Irish guy a break.
Right. Well, maybe your publisher can get involved too, you know.
Well, Dennis, I'm
Intercede on
sure.
your- set up some
Sure.
lectures or something that might help.
Well, I mean, I was invited out to lectures before on the Jerry Conlon book,
Right.
but I couldn't get a visa then either. So you never know. Hopefully, I'd love to get over it. I'd love to go and meet yourself and
We'd
get
have a
drunk.
great time. Yeah.
Get drunk.
I could take you out and show you all the Monument Valley and all the classic places. It would be a blast.
Reminisce about being.
Yeah. I was trying to think about some of the things I wanted to ask you. Okay, tell me about this group called Combat 18. Are they a real group?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not so
Nice
sure
to see
where
you,
they're.
Bernie.
See you later.
Combat 18 was a group of loyalists, right? Now they were even for loyalists in themselves are usually pretty extreme right-wing guys. These guys was way out beyond them on the right wing, and they were basically Nazis. The loyalists. Loyalists are people who believe in the Union and who would lift arms to fight for the Union for whatever with Great Britain. And they were on the very extreme right. They were very small, and they were very compact, and they were very hard to penetrate. But they were well armed, and they carried out some sectarian murders and stuff like that, you know. So I mean, they fitted, and they're Nazis. Their credo is absolutely Nazi, you know, and you know they would sell national. They'd sometimes put out National Socialist documentation.
Now, after I'm just kind of trying to get everything in here. After publication of the Northern Heist, we talked about this a little bit last time, but did lots of new information and new people come out of the woodwork with information?
Well, I don't know about information, but everybody wanted to be eruptions.
Yeah.
You know, I told you this before as well. I mean, I went to a few funerals, and invariably someone would step in and say, "Ricky, am I eruptions? Am I eruptions? Am I eruptions?" And they all, the guys like the idea of being this anti-hero, this genius who can think outside the box, who can pull off these huge moves, and I mean, eruptions was received very well over here. You know, the IRA wasn't hostile to eruptions. They liked the idea that they weren't getting the blame for the robbery.
Right.
You know?
Brilliant. Yeah. And so you were starting to say, and then we can wrap it up. You were starting to talk about a little bit about your research and going down the rabbit hole of research about Goering and about all of this period. Anything more you'd like to say?
Well, I had to. I didn't actually go to France and research the activities, or for that matter, Germany. But there was a lot of intense sort of documents, and where would this happen, and where would he be sitting, and where is this and where's that? There was an awful lot of research in it, and in terms of locations, right? Because even if, I mean, rather than me jump on a plane and start visiting all these places in Europe, the beauty of the modern computer is that you can literally have it up on the screen, and
it's your mates. They want to go out for pints. I can tell.
Well, that's it. Everybody's lined up at
You got a few more minutes. All right.
So and that was part of it, but it's a lot more than that involved, because the baton, for example, was particularly not tricky, but I had to get over the problem that the baton, the actual Herman Goering baton, is on display in Washington D.C. And I think it's the Marine Museum.
Did he actually make copies of it like you suggest in the book?
I don't know.
That was a great little detail.
Certainly. Oh, but no, but you can buy them.
Oh, really?
You can buy a total replica, and if you put it beside the original, you not know the difference.
Wow.
You can buy. I think it's $100 or £100. You can buy as many ceremonial batons as you like. They're actually made in Berlin.
Wow.
So, I mean, one of the ploys that Ruxians uses, as I'm sure you're aware, to get the original baton into Ireland, because that's the key. That's the key that opens up the treasure trove, is that he buys 4. And it's amongst the 4. So when the customs guy says, "What's all this?" he is able to say, "Well, they'll cost £100 each. That one's for Brother Seamus, and that one's for this guy, and that one's for that guy." And I actually brought in the preacher outside the bank. I don't know if you got that. Remember the wages was still in his day.
Right.
And then we started talking, and Ruxian starts talking about whether Protestants can, the Protestants, this preacher believed he'd saved hundreds of souls. And Ruxian's is dressed as a priest. He's disguised as a priest. He says, like, "I'm not too sure souls saved by Protestants matter." He says, "In fact, I'm not even too sure he's getting into heaven."
That's great.
This sort of Ruxian's sort of Ricky O'Raw craziness sometimes.
Yeah.
And I love that sort of stuff, you know. I love being that wee bit bananas, the wee bit balmy, and I love the humor. I mean, I just love the crack.
Yeah. What are you going to do next? Are you going to write another novel?
No, I'm finishing off a book on a biography on an informer. I got the first draft done, and then I'm going to go straight into Ruxians again.
All right.
I have a third. My publisher is looking at another Ruxians book.
Oh, great.
So I think there will definitely be at least one, maybe more, but there's definitely going to be another Ruxians book.
Do you have an idea?
Oh yeah. I mean, at the minute, that's really all I have, but that's all you need. All you need is the general idea and the concept. Once you have that, the other stuff comes. Even as I said at the start, even during the middle of the write, when you're actually writing it, sometimes I don't know what the next chapter is going to be, but it always shows up. And sometimes you have to change stuff left, right, and, you know, go back and change stuff. And when I'm in that sort of place, when I'm in that zone, right, I am in. When Ruxians is in Marseille, for example, I'm in Marseille with him. When he's in Paris, I'm in Paris with him. When he's in Chuck, Padraig, and Donegal, I'm with him. You know, not just him, with all the characters. And some characters just push their way and say, "You haven't given me enough room." So then you have to start, this character needs more development. And it's a great process. Once you get into it, it's great.
So maybe Ruxians can sneak into the United States and come out to the Southwest.
Well, Ruxians will, I would say, most definitely be in the United States.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of that's what I'm thinking, right?
Fantastic.
There's a huge event happened at the turn of the 20th century in Ireland in the around 1900s, and Ruxians is on it, right? And it leads into part of the United States, etc. But that's book 3, and it's going to be good crack.
Fantastic. One of the people watching on Facebook says, "Well, if you can't if you can't bring him here, maybe we should organize a tour to go to Ireland and see him. That'd be a great idea. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, to see where the gold is actually buried,
Yeah.
and you know where it's buried, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to see that.
I can. Oh, incredible! I can see tours to that site, right?
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's, don't want to say too much, but I could see tours to that site. But definitely, I envisage Russians going to America, and on a quest. He's looking for something, and the other end of it will be sorry, looking for it, trying to get it, trying to get what he wants isn't going to be easy, but we'll see where it takes us.
Fantastic. Well, Ricky, I know you got to go, but it's always a delight to talk with you.
Patrick, was lovely. I'm delighted you loved the other two books.
Yeah, and everybody watching, Goering's Gold. It's a must-read. Great summer read, by the way. Even though we're talking about all this heavy stuff, it's really a blast and a page-turner of a book. So congratulations, Ricky.
Thank you. And Patrick, it was lovely talking to you.
You too.
Hopefully we'll be talking again in 18 months, maybe 2 years time, about Russians again, book 3.
I may end up in Belfast with my wife, so I'll
Will you?
come visit.
Let me know. Bring it. I'd love that. That would be great. And we'll have a bit
That'd
of
be
chat.
fun. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. And
Thanks, Patrick.
thanks so much, Ricky. We'll talk to you
Mike.
soon, okay?
My pleasure. Talk to you, Carl, soon. Let me know when you get over to Belfast.
I will. I need to
Okay.
plan a trip. Sounds
All right.
great.
All right.